Poland's ambassador to Canada, Witold Dzielski, is here to help us unpack some of those comments. Hi, Ambassador. Good to see you. Thank you very much for making the time this evening.
Absolutely. Thank you.
How significant is it that the U.S. president came from Kyiv and made the speech he did today in Poland?
Poland, throughout the years, many years, and many terms of different presidents, has had a special relationship with the United States. I personally had the chance to work on 3 visits of President Obama to Poland, 1 visit of President Trump. Now it's, well, I'm not in Poland right now, but I observed the 2nd visit of President Biden, which is great. It shows the special link, especially today. It is very important since Poland plays such an important role in the context of war in Ukraine right now.
And it's in that context, right, that the president from the United States made the speech today. It's that we are just a few days away of marking this awful anniversary of 1 year of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Is it more significant that he made those comments in Europe, right next door to where this is all unfolding, than if he had said them in Washington?
It is spectacular that he went to Ukraine a couple of days ago, which was a surprise, and it's absolutely marvelous that this visit was kept in such a secret. It's very difficult with the organization of the visit of American president. But so the words he said in Kyiv are very important. And then coming to Poland, which is basically a hub for international support to Ukraine, and the words were absolutely significant with the recognition of the role of that Poland played, the Polish people played throughout the last year, but also recognizing the actions and the support of the international community. I think Poland is the place to talk about such issues because the whole international support in all possible realms is coming, majority of it is coming through Poland.
And the president certainly did talk about or insisted that that support would be there right until the very end. That's basically word for word what he said. At the same time, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, is making a State of the Nation address, as we highlighted there, basically accusing the West through that support of waging its own war on Russia, which is probably not a surprise, but he kind of packs that together with the idea that he's going to suspend Russia's participation in this nuclear arms treaty. What do you take away from that?
I think many experts were worried that the words of Putin would be stronger. But the message for me from his speech is that, first of all, there was lack of content in the...
even though it was 2 hours.
Even though it was 2 hours. And the message, the nuclear message, is not as strong as some might want to, fortunately, as some might expect it, because it's the suspension, it's not necessarily the withdrawal, and it's a suspension of a system which does not work anyway. So, you know, those inspections were, you know, difficult or didn't work for a number of reasons. So it's my hope is that at this point we do not need to worry about the nuclear context.
So then what is Putin's angle here today, do you think? What message is he trying to deliver to the West?
Well, his messaging was about words, is again about misconceptions and manipulations on the historical level, on the level of the role Russia played in the horrid aggression on Ukraine. I think even he is right now in the wait and see mode, because I mean, at this point even he has to understand that the level of complexity of the situation, the fact that on so many fronts he already lost the war on the political sense in the international arena, in the area of restricting the role of NATO in the region. He achieved exactly the opposite. And both sides are in the mode of entering into some sort of counteroffensive. So I don't see any special content in the words that he presented.
So let me ask you then, the one place where Russia has not lost yet is on the ground. When you talk about the offensive that both are expected to mount against each other. Yes. Key to that, according to Ukraine's president, is the supply of fighter jets. Poland has signaled that it is willing to supply fighter jets, the MiGs, but does not want to go it alone, would like allies more largely to at least lend some to offset that supply. Where do those discussions stand? And is the line kind of black and white for Poland? will Poland not go that alone?
Poland was on the lead on most of the significant topics during the war, whether it was sanctions, whether it was some preliminary ideas on military support, recently whether it was Leopard tanks, so the modern equipment. We were already in the conversation on fighter jets back in the day, and our position is similar today as it was before. We believe all possible support that the allies are able to provide is needed, but in the case of fighter jets, it is a little bit more complicated, and I wouldn't believe that Polish politicians would do the same thing as it was the case with Leopards. That Polish president said that we will simply provide the Leopard tanks. We will not do it alone in terms of.
There's a difference.
Of jets. There is a tactical difference, and there is a political difference and a strategic difference. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I appreciate your time this evening. Thank you so much, Ambassador.